What's your family's unsolved mystery? Apparently my great-great-grandfather was supposed to have died in, I think, if I am remembering correctly, the Civil War, according to my dad's side of the family. However, he lived to have future generations of sons and daughters, so we're still trying to figure that one out. Everyone seems to think he switched his military dog tags with a deceased soldier and just got the fuck out of there, so he could go back home to his family. Dad's side of the family is still baffled by it and fighting over theories. The day my father died from a car accident involving a boat trailer in the middle of nowhere out of state in 1991, my mom found a box with a Chinese medicine ball with a bell inside and a letter that said, "I am sorry." It was in our mailbox. She found it before she got the call that my father had died. The first autopsy on my father said there was a high blood alcohol content. My mom demanded a second autopsy and there was no alcohol in him. She had seen him less than an hour before he died and he hadn't been drinking that morning. My father was a third-party candidate for state governor and published an independent newspaper talking about corrupt politicians and organizations. When my great-great-uncle's house was to be torn down, they found old money hidden everywhere, even in the floor and the walls. Nobody knows where he had all that money from. My grandmother used to answer old-school rotary phones before they rang and there was always someone on the line. She would also tell us to go open the door for family and friends seconds to minutes before they were even in sight of the house. She was an extraordinary lady. Who is my maternal grandfather? The name on my mom's birth certificate is the guy my grandmother was married to at the time, but military records show that he was out of the country when my mom would have been conceived. DNA also backs this up. Sadly, none of my close DNA matches will respond to me. My father was found in a creek behind his business, dead from a sawed-off shotgun blast to the head. The small town ruled it a suicide, but his best friend ran the local funeral home and, years later, told me he didn't feel that the blast was self-inflicted. There are circumstances that support both suicide and murder. Knowing the truth won't bring him back. Just one more reason I'll never set foot in my hometown again. My so's dad mysteriously died in Colombia on vacation and his brand new Colombian wife had him cremated the same day. My second great uncle disappeared. We think it was the mob since he owed a lot of money or just gambled a lot. He also could have faked his own death and moved away. My great-grandmother hired a PI but nothing came out of it. Who they are, where they come from. Like, I've met my father, but he went on a rant about how we're the illegitimate great-grandchildren of some Swedish king, who, upon reading about, was suspected to be homosexual. Then he went on about how they've traced our lineage back to Eva the Boneless. I just backed away slowly, nodding politely. My mother says we go back to Romany Gypsy on her side. She's also had her brain addled by drugs and drink, so not terribly reliable information. I can't afford a 23andMe test, but I want one so bad. There has to be a sane member of my family out there somewhere. My wife and I were grocery shopping. We bought a nice piece of Pacific salmon for dinner. We paid for it. We put it in the shopping bag. We brought all the bags home. We took it out of the bag and put it on the kitchen counter. We never saw it again. It wasn't in the garbage, or behind the fridge or anything like that. Just gone. We lived in that apartment for 4 years afterwards and we never found it, or smelled rotting fish. In England around 1880, my 3x great-grandmother received a letter from her daughter. She read it, threw it in the fire and said she's made her bed, she'll have to lie in it. My 2x GG-mother never knew what happened to her sister Alice and later immigrated to the US. A couple years ago an unknown DNA relative from that branch reached out on Ancestry. She's mixed race with Jamaican roots but doesn't have clear written family records. I suspect that we're connected through Alice. My grandma saw Bigfoot. An otherwise completely rational, sane human being. Swears to God and gets mad whenever anyone brings it up. Who was Lady Jane on my dad's cousin's side? It's an old family rumor suggesting nobility in our ranks. I've traced a hell of a way back on Ancestry just for interest, not trying to find that specifically, and there are not Janes anywhere. I suspect many of my family are bullshitters. How the mustard splatter on the wall behind the fridge came to be. It was on top of the paint we used to repaint the kitchen. It was not there before pushing the fridge into place. It was a spatter coming from a direction of straight on, not falling from off the top of the fridge. No mustard was on the back of the fridge or floor. Who my dad is, I'm living a real-life mama MIA. A little more than 150 years ago, soon after Oregon became a state, my family moved there. They have lived in the same location, on the same plot, for that entire time, and have a very well-documented history in the state. All of us are just regular Caucasian farmers, and the majority of us can recite the pedigree offhand. Benjamin brought his family and his brother's family, making him the first member of our family to go to Oregon. Nobody has been able to locate any evidence that any of them ever existed before they arrived in Oregon. Whether or not my father was actually my grandfather's kid. Everyone involved, including my dad, is now dead, so the only real way to know for sure anymore is a DNA test. Thankfully my girlfriend got me an ancestry kit just recently, so before long this mystery will be solved. What my grandfather did in WW2. He was enlisted in the Italian army, leading a small infantry squad in occupied Yugoslavia, dealing with the civilian population to keep the order. He worked together with the SS. That's all we know. He never spoke a word, had nightmares the rest of his life. Who eats the gingerbread house before Christmas every year? We have twins who can talk to themselves without talking. It's creepy. Who broke the head off of the Hummel? No one will admit to it. 20 years later my mom is still pissed. I told her once we'd put the culprit's name on the back of her headstone. She did not think that was funny. My father was a liar about many things, some of which came to light before he died. I think he may have lied about being a Green Beret in Vietnam. There are no military records according to the government archives, but they may have burned in a fire. I saw military stuff and medals, but those are easy to buy even from catalogs decades ago. Was he even in the military? Also, how many half-siblings do I have out there? He was a real bastard. When my brother was in first grade I was probably 10, he won at school a full-grown frog that the class had grown from a tadpole. The frog was pretty big, like maybe the size of a Honeycrisp apple, and its name was Bufo. A few weeks after Bufo made the arrival to our house, he went missing. We never found him, he truly disappeared. No carcass found even after moving from this home. My mom is convinced my brother took it out and moved him, but to this day my brother is 27, he denies it. Where is Bufo? Where my aunt and uncle are. Apparently in the 80s and 90s my uncle made frequent business trips to South America using his private plane. Now it was never confirmed he was smuggling drugs, but come on. One day in the mid-90s, him and his wife just up and disappeared from their home. Nothing seemed suspicious, nothing was taken, no forced entry. Nothing. Nobody has heard from them since. The two prevailing theories are they were killed because of possible bad dealings with traffickers, or they saved enough money and just dipped. Witness protection is another theory but doesn't have much to go off of. My grandfather, Walter William Mazes, had two daughters, Mary and Tess, from his first marriage to Elizabeth Cowper. They were born in the 1930s, I believe, so most likely already passed away. I think one passed many years ago, but everyone who had information has passed away. They lived in the Ann Arbor area, both had children. I can find no trace of them. In 2016 I found, and made contact with, an uncle born from a third marriage. I would love to find my aunts, or their family while my mom and uncle still live, but have hit a brick wall. Ancestry DNA test found connections to my grandfather's siblings' children, but that is all. My great-great-grandparents came to the US in the 1880s, and died shortly after they got here. On paperwork it says they came from Germany or Austria-Hungary. I'd love to find some documents that narrow it down to a town or province, but haven't been able to find anything.